Hello everyone, hopefully you guys are excited for today's video where today we're going to be covering True Horrors of Thailand. Now what I mean by that is that we are going to be covering some ghost stories or spirits that may have some inclination to something real or just ghost stories in general coming from Thailand. And pretty close to the end I'll have something a little special for you, so if you want to just sit back, relax, enjoy what I have presented to you for now, and then at the very end we'll give you the surprise. But without further ado, let's get right on in. And I just want to apologize for anyone that is actually from Thailand and they're hearing me pronounce some of these things. I know I'm gonna butcher it, so just bear with me. So the first one that we're going to be covering is called Mae Nak Phra Khanong. Hopefully I didn't butcher the shit out of that, but for basic translation of that, it just means Lady Nak Phra Khanong, which is a place in Thailand. So the most common story, at least from what I could find just based off the internet, starts off the story of a beautiful young woman named Nak, who lived on the banks of the Phra Khanong Canal and who had an undying love for her husband Mak. And just so you know, Nak with an N and then Mak with an M. And while she was pregnant, Mak would be conscripted into the Thai army, being sent to war where he would be severely wounded. In some versions it's said that he was in the Keng Tung War, and others it doesn't really specify which specific war he was in, just that he went to war. But yes, while he was being nursed back to health in central Bangkok, Nak and her child would both die during childbirth. But when Mak returned from home, he would find that his wife and child were actually there waiting for him. His neighbors would warn him that he was living with a ghost, but he would ignore those warnings. And one day, as Nak was preparing Nam Phrik, hopefully that's pronounced right, Nam Phrik, it's P-H-R-I-K, apparently it's a chili dipping sauce. She would apparently chop a lime off the porch, and in her haste to retrieve it, she would stretch her arm to an impossible length and pick it up from the ground below. Upon seeing this, Mak would realize that his wife was actually a ghost. That night, Mak would attempt to sneak out of the house, fleeing with Nak in pursuit. And according to Thai folklore, ghosts are afraid of sticky blumea leaves, so Mak would then hide behind a blumea, and after some time, he would run into a Wat Mahatma temple, a holy place which a ghost could not enter in. In her grief, Nak would terrorize the people of Phra Khanong, furious at them for causing Mak to leave her. However, a powerful monk would capture Nak's ghost, and after confining her in an earthen jar, would throw it into the Phra Khanong Canal. And there are regional variations to the story, with one involving an old couple new to Phra Khanong finding the jar while fishing, and another where two fishermen would dredge up the jar, and in both of these stories, Nak would be freed when the jar was opened. There's also an alternate version of the story where a venerable monk named Samdet Pra Puthatchan, I'll put the pronunciation somewhere else because I cannot say it, and he's an actual person that you could look up and you could probably find some images of him. I'm probably going to put it somewhere on the screen so you can look and see he's an actual person. But it is said that he would defeat Nak by confining her spirit in the bone of her forehead and binding it to her waistband. And the legend says that the waistband is currently in possession of the Thai royal family by Admiral Prince Abhakara, the Prince of Chumphon. Again, I'm butchering the shit out of this, but whatever. He would also claim to have the relic, and in another story, the monk would assure Nak that in the future life, she would actually be reunited with her beloved husband, so she would actually voluntarily depart for the afterlife. It's honestly just up to interpretation of which story you prefer to go with, where you will see a statue of Mae Nak and her infant that form the centerpiece of the shrine, where devotees often make offerings, sometimes accompanied by a request for help, mainly by women who seek easy childbirth and for their husbands to be exempt from military conscription. Some offerings are usually lengths of colored cloth or wrapped around the trunk of the bo tree, while others include fruits, lotuses, and incense sticks. You could also find toys for her child and portraits of the ghosts displayed in the shrine's inner sanctum, where a collection of fine dresses are offered to her, being displayed behind her statue. And something pretty cool about this lore based off this spirit is that it's based off true events that actually developed into the story that the people of Thailand hear to this day, with Anek Nawi Kalmul, who was a Thai historian who would research the story and find an article of the Siam Prophet newspaper, which was written by KSR Kulab, dated March 10th, 1899. God, I am butchering the shit out of this. And for those who don't know who KSR Kulop is, he is basically a 19th century Siamese writer, historian, and essayist who was born in early 19th century Siam. Siam? I apologize to everyone for this. But his essays regarding the history of Thailand resulted in him producing tons of bodies of work across his career, with some of his works being censored by the Thai monarchy as being noted by others as unreliable. But this was mainly due to him being accused of altering sources of information, even though that they were accurate, and he said as much, but they just didn't believe him, mainly because they just couldn't find the documentation until much later. And along with that fact that he was pro-Western and had an eccentric writing style that his colleagues just didn't like, so he had a lot of people who didn't like him, and pro-Western, a bunch of stuff that kind of contributed to people making the claim that he wasn't reliable, but he was very strict on documenting everything properly. Kulop claimed that the story of Mae Nak was actually based on the actual life of Amdiang Nak, Jesus Christ, who was the daughter of the Tambang Phra Khanong leader named Kun Si. I am so sorry, Jesus Christ. With this story going to Amdiang Nak dying when she was pregnant with her son, worried that his father would remarry and that his inheritance would be shared with his stepmother. And so he would invent the ghost story as he would dress up in women's clothing and then would throw rocks at passing boats to make people think that it was Nak's ghost. Kulop would also make the suggestion that Nak's husband was named Chum, not Mak. And there is actually a sighting of it that goes into depth, so I am going to read it to you just because I find it interesting. And this is how the story goes. In the reign of King Rama III, a woman called Amdiang Nak lived with her husband Chum near the mouth of the Phra Khanong River, who died in childbirth. Chum buried her in the cemetery of Mahasabuya Temple. No ghosts appeared, but the older son, fearing that his father would remarry and lose his wealth, who devised a plan to prevent any such intentions. He hired men to throw stones at boat people near the cemetery and dressed himself up in women's clothes and terrorized the villagers as his mother's ghosts. And the son would later confess, but instead of it ending the mischief, it would actually spark several later iterations of Mae Nak's ghost. With this story maintaining popularity, with it producing many films, TV series, and even printed media to this day, which is actually pretty cool for anything that is more on folklore. It is pretty cool. But yes, that's the end of this story, and so we are going to move on to the next one, known as the Phi Pop. And I actually do really like the Phi Pop, so just letting you know. And so the Phi Pop is actually a cannibalistic spirit in Thailand and Laotian folklore, where it possesses a human body while eating her victims from the inside out, with it also having the capacity to raid and devour a town's livestock, feasting on anything and everything. With the story of what I'm assuming is the first actual pop going like this. The spirit was once a servant to a prince. The prince knew of magic words that gave him the ability to separate his spirit from his body, allowing it to enter and control the bodies of animals. The servant overheard the magic words and used them to enter the body of the prince instead. Now that his soul was wearing the prince's body like a costume, he pretended to be him and lived his life. But the prince's soul took control of a bird so that he could tell his wife what was really going on. His wife found the servant's body, still without a soul in it, and burned it. The prince then confronted his own body, still occupied by the servant's spirit. He said that the real prince had the ability to separate his mind and body and to occupy the bodies of animals. So, if he really was the prince, like he claimed to be, he should be able to do that. Tricked by the real prince, the servant spoke the magic words and left his body. But the real prince waited for this opportunity to enter and occupy his own body again. The servant could no longer return to his real body as it had been burned. From then on, the vengeful spirit moves from one human body to another, entering it while the person is sleeping and then proceeds to eat its intestines. Village legend says that this ghost now lives inside a shaman and leaves her body during sleep, but before the witch can die, the spirit has to find a body which the Phi Pop will then be transmitted to by either consuming some saliva from the old shaman. And if these ghosts succeed in haunting someone, they will then eat that person's intestines while sleeping. And generally, you wouldn't notice right away. At first, you would start to feel symptoms such as people either crying or shouting, with some even collapsing or fainting. or maybe you don't have any symptoms at all, or if any that you do have, worsening over time. And one way that is possible to get rid of them is to call a healing dancer who will then chase away the pop by doing a spinning dance. Because when the victim is watching the dance, the pop will then enter into the spinning motion and be chased away from the body. Which is kind of cool because I could see them twirling and like the spirit's like kind of like distracted and then gets thrown out of the body. And that's not the only way to get rid of them from what I could find. Other methods include either roasting chili peppers, letting the smoke into your nose, which, at least for me living in a Mexican household, I guess you could say I'm never gonna get a Phi Pop because my mom's always roasting chilies and you just fucking smell that shit no matter where you go. And another is by stabbing them with an ugly animal like a toad or a gecko, which will then cause them to be afraid, which is kind of weird. I can imagine myself grabbing a gecko and just like going up to like a homie and just stabbing him with my pet gecko, and apparently that scares the spirit into being like, ew, get away from me. Now, would you be surprised to hear that there are actually different categories of pop that exist? Well, there actually are, and we'll actually cover them real quick and some of their characteristics and what comes with them. So there are actually 3 categories of pop and then 1 main pop, with those being the pop thamada, the pop chuea, the pop lena, and the hagam. So the pop thamada is what people considered in quote ordinary pop, which is, I'm guessing, the main pop, the one that people frequently are encountering, in which this person is possessed by the spirit, and that in this case they become one and the same. So when the host dies, the pop that resides within them will then die as well instead of finding a new host. So the pop chuea is actually known as a hereditary pop, in where the pop is believed to be passed down from the parent to the child, kind of like inheriting the spirit, but only after the death of the parent, with this one being the most difficult spirit to actually break free from, due to the fact that this one has lived over generations. So the pop Lek Na, again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who is also known as a face switching pop, is the most clever and deceitful of the 3, where on the possession of a person, and if it being questioned to its master's identity, it'll then refuse to reveal them and will often lie and accuse someone that is innocent instead, and will also change its appearance to look like someone else in order to make them more difficult to find. And lastly is the Hagom, which is considered the strongest of the 4 and is known as the Lord of all pops, where it has control over the lesser pops and even over other spirits. Unlike the other 3, the Hagom isn't afraid of sunlight and isn't affected by sacred objects, monks, or holy amulets, and the only way to subdue them is by having a shaman who possesses spiritual powers that is equal or greater than its own. And I'm guessing this story has been passed down for an extremely long time, as the earliest mentions of it ever being mentioned in terms of literature dating back to around 1842 to 43, where it is mentioned briefly in a poem written by Sun Thorn Phu called Ram Phan Philippe. And I did try to find the poem, but I was only able to find an image of a manuscript that, when translated, didn't really mention the pop, but I think that is mainly due to me just not being able to speak any Thai, and that Google Translate is not that good. But if there is anyone that has like a link or something, or some source that I can find the poem, so that way I can read it, so I can see the mentions of it, because I do try to find it, but nothing. And apparently there actually would be a recorded incident of a possible pop dating back in November of 1892 in a small town of Uttaradit, where there was a man by the name of Ta Phuong, who, although he was very old, he was also apparently very handsome looking, and in the document his appearance was described as followed. His hair was completely white. His body shape and skin were smooth and distinct from the average Lao person. Anyone who saw him even once, even if they met him somewhere else, would definitely recognize him. One day, he was attacked in a horrific manner, burning his house in broad daylight. A group of monks also joined in the burning. After investigating, the reason was discovered. Besides Ta Phuong being chicly handsome, he was also a foreigner who had come to build a hut near Wat Pak Phang, Mueang Uttarat sub-district. And it wasn't long before a local man, who in the document was called, quote, the son of a Lao villager, would suddenly fell ill and stop talking. The shaman would then arrive and declare that, quote, a ghost had entered, No need to guess, the person who would then receive the title of ghost was none other than Ta Huang, who was the newcomer. Ultimately, he had to leave the city of Udon Thani and wandered around, not knowing where he was going to next. And there would be another case in 1908 in Bang Sangye, which is home to a St. Michael's church, where it was said that a pop had possessed 5 different members of families who had fled from their previous homes, with the situation being brought under control when 2 Catholic priests, Father de Salval and Father Ambroso, who would perform an exorcism on each of those family members, with that incident leaving an impression on some of the villagers who would then later convert to Christianity. And just kind of like a side note, the church is extremely beautiful if you actually go take a look at some of the images, which I'll put on the screen. Very beautiful church. I love the architecture. Something about it is just, it's very beautiful. Now, there are still mentions of pops even to this day, with a recent story happening in 2024 where a young woman who was 6 months pregnant with her second child, in which she left her home alone with her child and husband to go get some food, and while during the ride she would actually begin to notice the smell of betel nuts and along with a medicinal plant smell that seemed to have followed her. And although she was able to smell it, her husband couldn't, which was a bad sign for her. Later, she would then fall asleep and would describe a dream in which she took her grandmother to the hospital, only to find that the face of her grandmother wasn't her own, but that of someone that she's never met before. And she would say that in the dream that they were waiting for the doctor until she felt the baby kick, which is when her, quote, grandmother made her way over to her, where she would then get close to her belly before biting it very hard, but with no signs of bleeding, which is then when she would wake up and then would be unable to move, with her believing that it was no ordinary dream, but a warning of a pop following her home and was trying to devour her child. And just like our sweet Lady Knock, there are several films, shows, and comics, with one of them I personally want to see, which is called The House of Pop, which is definitely leaving an impression and is a very interesting spirit that you can find in Thailand. But yeah, the movie posters for some of these are pretty cool for some of the films. Like, they make me want to watch it, but I tried looking and you can't find it here, so I'll figure out some way to watch those movies. And the next one is the Krasue. The Krasue is the female spirit of the night, in which it manifests itself as a floating disembodied head of a woman, where she is described as young and beautiful and having her own internal organs still attached, trailing all the way down from her neck, and is usually accompanied by a sort of will-o-wisp kind of like glow that kind of seems to follow her around. And the cool thing is about this specific spirit is the fact that it's not really just exclusive to Thailand, but to a lot of the majority of the Southeastern Asian countries, including something very similar in Japan, which I find pretty cool. That's pretty universal, where it's described as a spirit that is able to move around by hovering in the air, with it either being a head with a neck or with only its trachea along with the heart, stomach, and intestines freshly dabbed with blood. But of course, there can be many interpretations, with some including more organs or with them having sharp teeth, with even one film called The Ghosts of Gut Eaters, including a halo which can then be left to the person's imagination of what you specifically want to see in a Krasue. And so specifically in Thailand, the origins of the Krasue is actually believed to be a cursed individual who did and committed a ton of sins during their life, and that after their death, their sins cause them to then be reborn as a malevolent spirit that feeds off waste, uncooked, or rotten food. And there are different iterations of the origins of the Krasue, such as the spirit being a formerly rich lady who had a length of black gauze tied around the head and neck as protection from the sunlight, with this woman then being possessed by an evil spirit and was cursed to become the Krasue. And in another is where the spirit may have been a woman who was trying to learn black magic, but in the process made a mistake and used an incorrect spell, so then her head and body became separated. Or how another person could be cursed or become a Krasue by consuming either food or a drink that has been contaminated with the Krasue's saliva. So the moral of the story for a lot of these is don't share your saliva with other people. So one of the things I personally think relates to the reason for the creation of the Krasue is the fact that the woman has either aborted or killed someone in their previous life, who will then become the Krasue as a punishment. So I personally believe that it is a story to deter women from aborting their children, but that could just be me. But anyways, we'll continue. The Krasue in Thai folklore is a cursed spirit that is always hungry and is always active during the night in order to hunt and satiate its hunger. So it'll seek either blood to drink or raw flesh to consume, and it'll mostly often attack either chickens or cattle and then consume the raw flesh. But it could also go for the carcasses of animals that have already passed away, and if it can't find anything, it will then eat any feces that it can find, which is foul. Which leads to you not leaving your clothes out at night, because if you do leave it outside, it will then be found either stained with either blood or poop, because she would apparently allegedly wipe her mouth after eating, which I kind of personally find a little funny, mainly due to the fact that she has some class, you know what I'm saying? But generally it will hide its body in order to return to it when daylight starts to show up, where it would then continue to live like a normal person during the day, but with them having kind of like a tired look. So in order for you to get rid of this specific spirit, you actually need to hide or destroy the body, because once the spirit is done with its hunt, it'll return trying to attach itself to the wrong body, which will then cause it to die a very painful death, or by also cutting off its intestines. So if you don't want to go through lugging a body anywhere, just chop its intestines and apparently that'll get it. But there is also the risk of the Krasue coming into your home while you sleep if you have some sort of cut or wound, because it'll be able to smell your blood. But you could also stop it, just in case you ever have the unlucky chance of experiencing a Krasue, and that is by building spiky fences or by either growing spiky bamboo, as they will be afraid of their intestines getting stuck and them not being able to escape. And it looks like there has been a lot of reports of people seeing a Krasue, but personally you can look at these with some doubt, as they make claims of people seeing strange things, but there will usually be either like a landowner or someone's countering the claim, saying that they are mainly just floating lanterns that are used to scare birds, or of reports of chickens dying or going missing. But this one, honestly, I think it's honestly just one of the neighbors deciding to eat one of their chickens. There's also the fact that, you know, an animal could have gotten them, but I think it's probably just a neighbor and they're just like, man, that's the 6th chicken this time. Say, Tim, do you have anything to do with this? Probably Krasue. And this spirit also seems to have a lot of films and shows about it, with some pretty cool movie posters and imagery that kind of leave me wanting to also see these. And there's apparently also a game on Steam, which I will be playing at a later date. I don't know when, but I will be. The next is the Phi Nang Lum. So the translation of the Phi Nang Lum either means apparition of the suffocated woman or woman of the water, and there are technically 2 iterations from what I could find, so I'll try to cover them both as best as I can. Because the story behind this woman is that she drowned in some sort of body of water, whether from a stream or a lake, where she would be described as having a melancholy face, with long dim hair sticking to her face and shoulder, with her clothes looking worn and dripping wet, with some instances holding her own body up in an attempt to remain above water. Where back in ancient times, they would actually view suffocating as a horrific way to go out, and that anyone who met this fate would actually not be able to move on, which would then cause them to live forever as a spirit. And obviously, to many stories, this is no stranger to any alterations to the story, such as her being murdered or essayed by just being a simple woman who went out to go fish or to wash her clothes by the riverbank, with the main message of this being a warning to kids to be either mindful when around water after sunset or during the night. And from an article I found, you'll know when she's around because on a calm evening when the water's still, one can hear the cries of a woman, almost as if the river is carrying her sobs. Some have said that they would either hear a voice calling out either for help or of mourning because of her lover, because she'll never see them again. And if you were ever to go out looking for her, she would either be found by the riverbank, either standing on her knees with her head looking far off as if she was looking for something or someone. And there are ways to appease her, with some either making offerings of food, flowers, and even incense by the water, reducing the chances of angering her. And in the other iteration of her, it is said that she is the ghost of a traditional Thai dancer, in which she serves as a reminder to respect and preserve traditions and customs, with her having blood dripping down her face with some severed body part, and that the sounds of drums come along with Thai music being accompanied as she dances. Now, as to which story is, I guess, the true one or the most accurate one, I'm actually leaning more towards the former, and that is mainly due to the translation, and also because it comes with the fact that her story is very similar to the story of La Llorona, and that there is a possibility that these 2 stories could be a mix of them being together, like it could be a Thai dancer that drowned, but that's just my guess. The next one we have is the Phi Am. The Phi Am is a ghost known for laying on top of their victims, causing them discomfort as they sleep with the victims, sometimes having trouble breathing during the night as a result. And there are also different versions, one known as the Widow Ghost, where this one specifically attacks men, and in order to avoid the ghost is to put on lipstick before heading to bed. Because if you do that, the ghost will then think that you are a female, making it leave. Sorry, but this one's kind of funny because I could totally expect some gooner out there to be like, what? There's a ghost that sits on you? Oh god, I hope there's not a tall Amazonian goth mommy to sit on me in the middle of the night. Oh, that would be horrible. What?
You are my friend. I don't hear you.
Whatever, we're moving on. We're moving on. And now, in terms of this ghost actually having a lot of lore, it's actually sad to say that it really doesn't, as all things point to it actually being a sleep paralysis demon that people might have experienced leading to the creation of this ghost, which is kind of sad because it's mostly just people with sleep paralysis waking up and then they make up a story of a spirit. But it's more sad of the fact that there's no lore behind it. It would have been pretty cool if there was some lore to it. And last but not least is the Phi Lang Kluang. Kluang? How do you pronounce it?
Kluang. Kluang. Kluang.
Ew. What the fuck? But this ghost is one from southern Thailand, where it is described of having a large wound on its back, but that at first isn't noticeable, and that you are most likely to encounter it when you're out camping with your friends, whether by going out to fish or by sitting next to them to the fire in the middle of the night, in which then a random stranger will then come up to you and your friends out of nowhere and then join the group, where it will then not look to harm anyone, at least in some of the cases. And as it continues to stay with your group, the more its charm will seem to have an influence on you, befriending you and your friends. It'll then make a joke or make a request by asking you to scratch its back in order to reveal its true nature. And once you do, you will then be greeted with a gaping wound full of maggots, worms, and millipedes filling the wound. And on the unlucky chance that he does decide to attack you, the insects all over his body will then begin to crawl into you, where they would then begin to devour you. Once done feeding on you, the worms and bugs will then return to the host, where the creature will then disappear. Now, just like the other one, this one was pretty short, which I think is mainly due to the fact that just a lot of these stories about these spirits, there are a lot of spirits talked about in Asia that I could have put into the video, but some of them aren't just as covered. Either could be because this is the US and we just don't talk about those stories, or it just doesn't have that much information in general with its origins, or either of some of the reported incidents with anything involving the Phi Lang Kluang. And so we reached the end, which should be the end of the video, but here's the surprise. I actually decided to write a story about the Phi Lang Kluang, mainly due to the fact that the last one was too short, and I felt like I needed to give you guys a little something more, because I don't like doing short videos. I like doing long form stuff that you could listen to when you're at work, stuff like that. So I decided to write my own story. Is it good? I don't know. You guys be the judge of that. You guys can tell me if it was good enough. I think it was okay for what it was. I tried my best. I am no writer. It does have like anybody that reads like Reddit stories, it will have like a r/Reddit stories or whatever the Reddit horror site. So it'll have that kind of format. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm not posting it anywhere. I'm not going to put it on like a Reddit or anything. So this is exclusively just for this video. So if you ever want to find it, just go here. I'll put timestamps, all that. I'm going to make shorts of it. But yeah, no more joshing around. You know, hopefully you guys enjoy. And without further ado, here's the story of the Phi Lang Kluang. Hello. This will be my first time ever telling the story that you're about to hear. I never thought I'd tell this to anyone, but over the course of seeing so many stories online of other people having experiences of the paranormal that are either similar in nature or something that we cannot entirely explain. So I thought, for my own peace of mind, and because I hope that someone out there will believe my story. So, without further delay, this is the story of my encounter with the Phi Lang Kluang. This would all take place in my home country of Thailand about a few years back. And just for the sake of not putting anyone with the means of traveling to Thailand at risk, I'm not going to mention any exact locations, just that this happened around southern Thailand. But I remember that day as if it happened yesterday. I took in the fresh summer air that came when we had good days with little humidity. As I was deep in thought, I would be taken away from it as I would take notice of ripples traveling across the surface of the water. I turned to the source and find myself in front of my friend who, for the purposes of the story, we'll call Somchai, casting my line into the water. "Come on, man, the fish ain't catching themselves," he would say with a bright smile, arms at his side, wearing a light green Shrek shirt. For some reason, he really liked the film. Don't ask me why, he just did. But Somchai was always like that, always positive and full of energy, able to make friends with others easily, while I, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. I usually kept to myself in my younger years, not because I wanted to, but because it was easier said than done. I do owe my thanks to Somchai, because out of all the friends that he made in our village, he, for some reason or another, chose me as his best friend. Relax, I'm just taking it all in. It's definitely a nice change of pace, especially now since I know I'll be busy when I get back. He sighed heavily in a sign of agreement, since at the time I was studying in university, while Somchai was working at some office job in some faraway city away from where I was at. We kinda began losing touch as we grew older and began to pursue our respective careers, so I thought it would have been nice for the both of us if we both took a day or two to reconnect. And what better way than to go out fishing in a secret spot that we discovered when we were little and kept going after that. Ugh, don't even get me started. It's always non-stop for me. I almost have no time for anything personal. It's always help with this, help with that. We need this project done by this time. And even though there's other people who can help, they choose me because I'm, quote, responsible. He huffs in annoyance, casting his line into the water. Ah, cheer up. All that work will pay off. You already said it yourself that promotion's on the way if things go the way they do. He wanted to be annoyed, but saw the logic. Yeah. Still, can a guy complain every once in a while? Even if things are going his way? I laughed. I guess so. Just don't forget about the money that comes with it, alright? We need you to buy some actual good beer for the next trip, not this nasty shit that tastes like a monkey pissed in it. He turns over to me in faint offense. Excuse you? I'll have you know that this is the best beer that money can buy. I'll have you know that the only piss this thing tastes like is if the piss was by the heavens themselves. He tried eluding some sense of passion and admiration for the drink, but it was clear from his attempt of hiding his shiver that he held the beer in anything but high regard. Right, whatever you say, Mr. Big Shot. We joked for a bit before sitting back down, catching up with each other's lives and enjoying the calm, peaceful silence of the day. After an hour or two, I began looking at the water with a disconcerted look. Something up? Somchai would ask, looking over to me. Nah, nothing really. Just that we haven't really caught anything for a while. He shrugged before recasting his line. It happens. Sometimes they're active, other times you don't get so lucky. Whether by the mood or just circumstances. It's all a part of the fishing game, you know? Well, yeah, I know that, but when in our previous trips to this lake have we never been catching fish left and right the moment we'd get here? It was at that moment that a thought crossed my mind. Never? He'd say. Exactly, never. Plus, right now, don't you get the feeling like we're being watched? He'd consider it for a second before responding. Yeah, I guess, now that you mention it, I do feel it. But there's literally no one here except the occasional wild animal. He goes to the cooler and opens a can of beer and hands one over to me. Also, dude, you know I hate spooky stuff. Maybe school's got you all kinds of stressed out. Here, take one and chill out before you really start scaring me. Spooky story time isn't until nighttime. Got it? I nodded, grabbing the beer and taking a sip of it before looking back at the water. The unnerving feeling was still there, almost like some cloud was hanging over us, even though nothing to the day gave the impression that something was wrong, except for the fish not being active. So, I decided to shake the feeling away by drinking and trying to relax. After a while, I was able to forget about the weird feeling in the air, which is when Somchai's line began getting pulled into the lake. Oh shit, look at that! See? Nothing to fear, man. We needed to be patient. Almost! It wouldn't take Somchai long to capture the fish, and it really was a decent-sized fish. Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about! He lifted up his can into the air, basking in the victory. A toast to the fishing master! He'd laugh at his triumph and began chugging his beer, and it would have been the perfect moment if it wasn't for him coughing and hissing at the taste. Fuck! It really does taste like a monkey pissed in it. We'd both laugh after that, and we were both able to finally relax, truly beginning our fishing trip. We'd continue fishing, drinking, and chatting, catching a few more over the course of the afternoon, talking about random things right around the time when we would head back to the camp. Almost time to go back, I said to Somchai, who was laying back in his chair, looking nothing if not relaxed. Yeah, I know. I'm just hoping to catch one more so we can both have an equal amount to eat. Now, if there was one thing Somchai wasn't good at, it was drinking. He was the definition of a lightweight. Over the course of the day, he'd only drink about 3 beers before I started to see the flush on his face, and probably another before I'd start to hear him heavily slurring his words. But as I had that train of thought, my attention would soon be directed to the other side of the lake, where I would see a shadow peeking out of a couple of bushes before going back into the forest. You see that? Somchai, in his own drunk little world, would turn to look at me. I'd point into the opposite direction of the lake. Over there. It looked like something went into the bushes. He would look in the direction that I was pointing at, trying to see any sign of movement. But whatever was there decided to go back into the forest. Whatever it was, it's gone now. What'd you see? Not much, if I'm being honest. Just something poking out and heading back into the forest. He looked at me considering. Well, maybe it was a hare. It's not impossible to find one here. The only bad thing is we don't have a lot of time to go hunting for them. But maybe we can do that tomorrow. I'd almost forgotten about the rifle that he brought with him, packed up behind his chair. He goes back to fishing, grabbing another beer in the process, while I went back looking at the spot where that thing left. Could it have been a hare? I thought to myself. I wanted to believe that was the case, but I wasn't sure. It looked a little too big to be a hare, especially with the way that it went back into the bushes when it noticed that I had seen it. So, in order to distract myself from that thought, and to avoid scaring Sonchai, because he was way worse with anything scary when drunk. So, I sat down alongside him, deciding that it was best for one of us to stay sober just in case anything happened. I then turned over to ask him about his yai, who he'd gone to visit not long after we made the hike to the lake. Well, she's doing fine, although she was sort of against the whole camping trip initially when I told her. Why's that? She's not the type to worry about us camping, especially when the village isn't that far away. He would then lay his back into the chair, trying to recall the conversation through his alcoholic fog. Well, she mentioned how there's been reports of missing people near the region. Hikers, campers, etc., where the group would have one of their members either go to the bathroom or split from the group and just not show back up, which concerned them enough to the point where they would do scouting parties in order to see if they either got lost or some animal got to them. I looked at him surprised at the news. Did they find anything? Curiosity grabbing my attention. Well, they found nothing in the trails that the campers frequented, but at one of the campsites during one of the searches, they'd find the supplies of a missing camper not that far away from camp, and Somchai began to quiet, looking uneasy before continuing. And? I'd ask him with bated breath. He'd then close his eyes before steeling himself, looking as if he was trying not to throw up at what he was about to say next. They found a jaw. Only a jaw. No skull, no body, just that. I looked at him with horror. You can't be serious. No trace of blood or anything to lead him back to what did that to them? He began chugging his beer in order to avoid thinking too hard on the details. That's just the thing. No blood or muscle. The jaw was picked clean. The only thing that they could find near it was an abnormal amount of insects and maggots. Looking back, I recall that the more he told me about these disappearances, the more that cloud hanging over us grew. But I was so caught up in the moment with what he was telling me that I didn't take notice, because for as long as I can remember being on this earth, I don't think I ever felt a rising dread of that magnitude, and yet something inside me still wanted to know more. Insects? He gave me a slow nod. Millipedes from what she told me. Shit gave me the shivers when I first heard it. I hate those things, but other than that they found nothing. From what I heard, they were making plans to continue the search in order to find who or what got to those hikers, but as of right now, they still don't have much to go on. And your grandmother still let you go camping? I said with an incredulous look. I know. I thought the same thing, but I felt like if we didn't go camping during the time that you're not in school, I might get too busy for us to plan anything in the future. So I reassured her, letting her know where we were going to be and that I was bringing my rifle for protection. That seemed to have comforted her enough for us to go. I sat back down, looking at my line, which was still bobbing around in the water, trying to process everything. Well, that's something at least. Just in case we end up meeting some sort of animal ready to get a piece of us. Though I don't recall ever seeing anything too dangerous in this area. Because over the years of me and Somchai going to this specific lake, I don't ever recall us ever having an encounter with a dangerous predator, which is one of the reasons why this lake was so special to us. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much, especially since I'm the most dangerous. And right when Somchai was about to finish his sentence, his line began to pull. Look at that, man, looks like we got lucky. He'd laugh at the thrill of catching another fish to perfectly end the day, if it wasn't for the look of strain on his face. Damn, this thing is strong. Can you give me a hand? This thing is really... Whoa! He would then get pulled extremely hard to the point where he almost lost balance and fell into the water, but I managed to grab him just in time for him to gain his footing. What the fuck? How big is this damn fish, man? It's got the strength of a newborn. He'd say, try to make light of the situation, but even I could tell that this fish was no joke, because even I was using all my strength to pull Somchai back. So we tried holding onto the line, trying our best not to snap the line or lose the fish, but eventually we felt a change, and then decided to pull with everything that we had. And just like that, the fish came out of the water, and to this day, I can still imagine the size of it in my hand, because it was the biggest thing I'd ever laid my eyes on. We'd celebrate after, talking about cooking the fish, and celebrating once we got back to camp. But that's when something caught my eye. When I turned back in the direction of the other side of the lake, where I saw the thing, I could see something poking out of the trees again. And this time, I was able to see the silhouette of something to the like of a person, watching us. It was then that I felt the intensity of the area, something that feels impossible to describe even now. But I had sensed that we had angered something for stealing its meal. A sort of cold anger that brought out a deep sense of danger, warning me to get out of there. So, as best as I could manage, I began grabbing our stuff, telling Somchai to start heading to camp. Thankfully for him, he was still drunk enough to not notice what I saw. Grabbing everything and walking back, talking about how, aside from the weird stuff at the beginning, he was enjoying every bit of the trip. But that would soon change. When we arrived, we'd set our stuff down by the campfire in order to start a fire, while Somchai would go into our tent grabbing ingredients and any other miscellaneous items that we used to make a dish. It didn't take us long to start the fire and prep everything for our last meal of the day. By that time, we'd gone back to joking around and talking, so much so that Somchai had gotten drunk to the point of slurring his words, bringing up memories of the past while I played the role of babysitter. He'd go on telling me how, as kids, we'd always had the habit of going out and exploring with other kids outside of the village in search of treasure before coming back and telling each other stories that we made up on the spot. It was moments like those that brought out the feeling of nostalgia, of being taken back to that time, of innocence and the simple joys that came with adolescence. As we went about talking about random things, listening to the crackle of the fire, and while taking in the stars that illuminated the night sky, we would soon be disrupted by a sound of something moving in the bushes. Without hesitation, Somchai, as drunk as he was in that moment, was quick enough to grab his rifle and point it in the direction of the noise. "Is anyone there?" he'd say, trying to come off as threatening, but it was clear to anyone that the man was trying not to slur his words. For those few seconds between us, hearing the noise and Somchai calling out to whatever was out there, my mind would recall back to that thing back at the lake, making me hold my breath and waiting to see what would come out to greet us. What came out of those bushes was a person, but from the looks of it, it seemed as though they either had been living in the woods for a while or had gotten lost, because at first glance, you'd immediately take notice of the dirt and grime on his face and tears from his clothing. And yet, he didn't look injured or frail. In fact, if anything, he just looked hungry and a little matted.
"Hello there, friends. I'm sorry if I startled you both. I didn't mean to. I got a little lost and smelled the fish that you guys were making. Is it okay if I sit with you both?"
Me and Somchai looked at each other, both of us having the same thought, and decided to let him stay. "Yeah, sure, you could sit over there." Somchai would point on the other side of the fire, away from both me and him.
"Thank you. I really appreciate it."
He would then make his way over to the fire, sitting down, taking in the warmth from the fire. Somchai would then whisper in my ear, "Dude, are you thinking the same thing that I am?" I nodded and continued looking over to our guest. We both knew that our visitor was probably harmless, but I didn't think either of us could shake the fact that it was still a weird situation to be in, since no other person knew of the location of this lake. But, in order to find out more information about him, we needed to ask questions. "Here, take my rifle. I know I should be fine, but just in case the worst, I can't trust myself with it as drunk as I am now," Somchai whispered in my ear. I nodded and then proceeded to take the rifle, sitting it next to my lap. Our guest would then look up at both of us with a smile on his face.
Say, would it be a lot to ask for one of your fishes? It's been a while since I had something to eat."
No, not at all. Here. Somchai would then pass one of our fishes over to the guest, where he would then ask for his name.
"My name?"
He would say with a look of registering when we asked, and then pausing as if to think.
Sanun. Yes, Sanun."
He then looked down, taking a bite out of the fish, making an audible sound as if pleased as to the taste of the fish.
"Oh wow, this fish is good. Did you make it?
Sanun would ask Somchai. Yeah, I did. Do you like it? Sanun nodded his head vigorously.
Very much so. Definitely better cooked.
I had looked at him puzzled. Do you not cook your fish? He then looked over to me, giving me a look that I couldn't decipher.
Oh yes, all the time. I love cooking my fish.
He'd then give me another smile before going back to eating. I'd give Somchai another look, telling him that I thought that the response was off, more due to the way that he said it. What I found odd was that it almost sounded like he was saying the words, but didn't know the meaning behind them, at least not completely, and it seemed that Somchai had agreed as well. So, Sanun, where are you from? Sanun would then look at Somchai with food still in his mouth.
I live close by.
Somchai would continue probing. You live in one of the villages close by? Sanu nodded. Well, the closest one is one that me and him are from, and I don't ever recall you being someone from there. And the second is kilometers away. Sanun would again go back to his default smile, looking at Somchai.
I recently moved here, from very far away.
It was weird. I recall in that moment looking at him as someone I didn't want there. A threat. His responses were odd, to say the least. And yet, I couldn't, for as much as I tried to pull those feelings out, telling him that he was not welcome and to get the hell out of there, I couldn't. Something about him made me resist any notion of getting rid of him. And the more we tried questioning him, the more those questions became casual exchanges and eventually jokes. Before I knew it, Somchai and I forgot that Sanun was a complete stranger. If anything, it felt like we knew him for a long time, and he was another one of our friends that decided to join our little camping trip. So, we stayed there talking, drinking, and eating with him. Then I remember Sanun making a strange request.
Hey, do you think one of you can do me a favor and scratch my back? It's kind of itchy.
Without hesitation, Somchai would get up to offer. And yet, although a part of me knew that it wasn't a good idea, all that would be drowned out by the charismatic pull that made it hard to resist Sanun. That is, until Somchai got right behind Sanun and put his hand on his back. What the fuck? Would be the thing that snapped me out of the hold Sanun had on me. I would then look over at Sanun's back, where I would find a gaping wound filled with worms poking outside of the flesh, alongside maggots and millipedes, with Somchai trying desperately to pull away, but looking as if he was stuck. I remember the area being filled with a putrid smell of rotting flesh and blood once I snapped out of it. Sensing the immediate danger that we were in, I'd grabbed the rifle, pointing it at the thing that called itself Sanun, and by the time I looked back, I'd be welcomed to a horrific sight. The air being filled with the cries of Somchai's arm being eaten by the maggots that infested Sanun's body. I took aim and shot at the thing's head from near point blank. Finding it that it didn't seem to do anything except anger it, fear began building within me. I took another shot at the thing, and still nothing. By that point, Somchai's cries became less and less, with whatever strength he had left telling me to run far away from the creature in order to get to safety. I think we both knew that he wasn't going to make it if I didn't do something quick, because nothing I did was stopping this creature and what it was going to do to my best friend. But I still had to try. I didn't want Somchai to die, so I grabbed one of the logs from the fire, trying to burn that creature. It was then that a new hope of survival shined through, and a whole new dread arose. Because the fire did have an effect, causing it to let go of whatever pull it had on Somchai, but that would cause it to turn its attention to me. So, with the now torch in hand, I tried waving it side to side, creating some distance, shouting at Somchai to run. With an audible grunt, he gets up trying to hold on to his bleeding mangled arm, still filled with maggots eating away at him. He goes to one of our bags, grabbing at a nearby flashlight and running into the woods in the direction of the village. The thing tried to turn its attention back to Somchai, but I didn't give it an opportunity, so I burned it again with the torch. It recoiled in pain as I led it into the forest in the opposite direction of where Somchai was heading.
No matter where you run, I will find you.
It said in a wheezing, almost inhuman, distorted voice. But as much fear as that thing instilled in me, at that very moment, my only priority was to keep Somchai away from that thing. And so what felt like an eternity, I'd lure the thing away to give enough time for Somchai to get some distance. But once I knew I had given him enough time, I then began to run. As I ran through the wilderness, I could still make out the sounds of the creature running behind me, at times catching up, and other times losing me. But at some point, I had to lose my only source of light so that I couldn't find my exact location. But navigating around the forest at night was a completely different thing. Everything looked as if the forest itself had molded and changed. Paths and shortcuts that one could take now were gone to the shadows. I knew I had to keep running, to reach the village and hoping to find Somchai already there, warning the villagers so that they could help in dealing with this thing. I don't remember how long I ran for, but at some point I noticed that there was no sound. I slowed my pace down in order to hear if I'd actually lost it, and heard nothing. And when I mean nothing, I mean literally nothing. Not the wind, not the sounds that the forest carries, only the sound of the world freezing for an instant. Just then I would hear the sound of a breaking branch close by. Dreading that it might be the thing finding me, I decided to hide. With my heart beating in my throat, I waited for any signs of what was to come. "Hey, dude, are you there?" It was Somchai. A wave of relief would hit me at the sound of my friend's voice, seeing that he was able to escape. But just as I was about to come out of hiding to face my friend, the dark cloud that had hit me back at the lake and at the campsite came rushing back tenfold, stopping me in place. "Where are you?" "It's me." But that wasn't Somchai. Sure, it sounded like him, at least initially, but when you listen to him, actually listen to him speak, you can make out something was off. Almost as if he was trying to sound like himself, but came off with an uncanny valley to his voice. "I can smell you," it whispered. My blood ran cold, my eyes shot wide open. A primal fear overtook my very soul. I dared not breathe, because if I did, I fear it would know the location of where I was hiding. So I sat there, frozen in place, waiting to be discovered. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of footsteps coming closer in my direction. I wanted to run. My body told me to run. But I couldn't. I couldn't outrun it, not from this distance. So, as I got closer and closer, feeling a sharp chill running down my spine as I knew this was it, I closed my eyes, waiting for it to get me. Then, silence. I'd opened my eyes slowly, hoping to hear a sign that it had either lost interest or lost track of my scent. I then started to hear the footsteps slowly getting farther and farther away from me. And although some time passed, I still didn't want to leave, in fear of it just waiting for me to come out of hiding. It wouldn't be until I heard the sounds of the forest going back to normal that I decided that now would be my only chance to make my escape. It wasn't long after that I was able to find an area that I recognized. With hope in my heart, I ran as fast as my feet could carry me, soon reaching the outskirts of the village, waking everyone up and telling them what I saw. They would then begin to prepare to look for Somchai, who they say hadn't arrived. Fearing for my friend's safety, they told me to rest at his yais, where I would be safe. So, I stayed there, feeling relieved, knowing that I was away from that thing, but worried alongside his grandmother for her grandson, hoping that he at least found somewhere to hide. It wouldn't be until sun rose that the villagers returned disturbed. When I asked them if they were able to find the creature or Somchai, they shook their heads.
"We found her campsite. It looked as though a storm blew right through it. Everything was all over the place. We found half-eaten fishes on the ground, and the blood. There was so much blood."
I lost all feeling in my legs when I heard that and fell to the ground. "Somchai," I remember whispering. Did it get him? Was he alright? So many thoughts filled my mind. I wanted to go back. Knew I had to go back. But I couldn't. I was scared of that thing, of what it could do to me, so I stayed. They reassured me that they would continue their search, now knowing what to look for and where to find it, asking me to give them any other information that they could go on. So I told them about the lake being a possible location. They told me they would go there to check next, but that it was best for me to head back home, more out of worry for my safety. It was easy for me to say yes to that. I wanted to get as far away as I humanly could, because deep down, I knew that after it was done chasing Somchai, it would want me next because of what I did to it. After the events that transpired that day, I would return back to school where I would continue my studies, eventually entering a program that required me to go overseas to the US for a potential internship that would turn into a job right after I graduated. I still kept in touch with his grandmother, getting updates on the whereabouts of her grandson and of the creature, which is when she asked me about what exactly we saw. So I told her everything, hearing her audibly gasp when I finished telling her my experience.
"What you found in the woods was no creature, but a spirit known as a Phi Lang Kluang.
She told me about its history, its characteristics. There was no room for doubt that what me and Somchai encountered was the Phi Lang Kluang. It would be a day or two after that call where I'd finally get an update, and it wasn't what I'd hoped. The good news, I'd imagine you want to hear first, is that they were able to find a cave not far from the lake where the Phi Lang Kluang made its home. They made sure it wouldn't return. The bad news, however, was that they found many remains, both of lost hikers and campers, with them specifically finding one wearing a light green Shrek shirt covered in blood on the right side, picked clean. No muscle, no blood. It seems that what caught the Phi Lang Kluang's attention right before it caught me was the smell of Somchai's blood, who had most likely passed out due to the point of exhaustion and due to blood loss, becoming its next victim. Since then, I managed to get the job once I finished university and decided to live here in the States, far away from the lake, around the Appalachian Mountains, where life has been pretty peaceful, slowly burying the memory of what happened that night. To this day, I wish I did things differently. Maybe somehow save my best friend from his fate, or at the very least build the courage to go look for him. But I can't change what's done, and for that, I have to live with it. I wish I could tell you that this was the end of the story, that the spirit is long gone, but that's not the case. The reason I write this, the real reason I'm telling you this story that happened all those years ago, is because I need someone to know what happened to me and my best friend. To be careful if you decide to go camp in southern Thailand, because a few nights ago, I began to hear things out in the woods at night, which led me to write my story. Even now, as I write, I hear the cries of my long-deceased friend telling me that I couldn't save him from the Phi Lang Kluang, that I didn't bother to even muster the courage to try. And recently, I've started to hear a knock on my window, hearing the whispers of that inhuman voice saying, "No matter where you run, I will find you." I ask that you pray for me, because I don't think I will live long enough to see tomorrow.
Okay, so now we actually really have reached the end of the video. Let me know what you guys think of the story, if there's anything I could have improved on. Again, this is like my actual first time actually writing a story, and I tried to do the best job that I could. In terms of projects, gameplay is it can be more frequent. It just depends if you guys are willing to watch those, because I personally do like doing these projects more. I feel like that's mostly what you guys like to see, mostly because gameplay, you actually need to watch me doing the gameplay. These ones, they're more infrequent, mainly due because of the time that they take to make and to research and all that. So if you guys don't mind watching gameplay videos, or at least me posting those up, you guys can go check those out. I normally do post those after a project, or I try to do two every 2 weeks. That's my schedule that I try to maintain. But you guys can check those out in the meantime while I'm working on projects. These will come out whenever they're done. So yeah, that's how the schedule is going to go so far. But again, hopefully you guys like it. That's how the system is going to work as of right now. Yeah, without further ado, I hope you guys have a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night. And until next time, you guys take care.